Hi, Navran here with another commentary, and this time it's going to be a game where only I am in. This is what happens when you make a game where you only play yourself in, and the purpose of this video is to sort of help players feel more comfortable with their race. Obviously, if they are masters or below, it can help people feel more comfortable with the race by playing around with the race, uh, just on their own, not against anyone. And this is an exercise that I really like to do to warm up before any heavy laddering session, or just something that I tell my friends to do if they feel that if I feel that they're lacking in mechanics or whatever. And this is purely a mechanical exercise, and I feel that for someone to really unlock their true potential in StarCraft 2, they have to get their mechanics down first and then let the decision making come afterwards. Obviously, this is a very frustrating sort of mentality, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist when I want to study StarCraft as a game, so you'll just have to bear with me for a sec. So in this build, it's a variant of the old Stefano 200 max in whatever minutes, in less than 12 minutes. And what I like to do is start off from sort of like a ZVP, where I start off with a 14 pool. And something that I noticed when I first started playing StarCraft 2 was these little things that were just sort of unique to Zerg, like when you were 10 out of 10 supply and your Overlord popped and you made two drones because you had two larvae saved up. The third larva comes relatively quickly compared to what you usually expect if you just started playing the game. And in this case, the 14 pool which I placed actually was the 14th drone, the 14th supply drone that was made out of the hatchery. So as that finished, it had just enough money to build a spawning pool. So just little things like that. I just want people to get really comfortable with their race. If that wasn't clear, if you didn't know what that meant. And the next topic is optimal saturation. As I'm going for a 16 hatch in this build and getting a queen and then a third hatch. That's really just a small basic build that I'll link in a Google document in the description. And the whole saturation is that even though your hatchery says 24 workers are optimally saturated, the most efficient way to mine a mineral field is by having two drones. And since there are 8 mineral patches, 2 drones each would mean that there's a total of 16 drones mining mineral base. So as soon as you have 16, you should, to be as efficient as possible, you should rally it to your natural or another mineral field. And this is what I sort of do. And since this is a purely drone-heavy build and make units, not like you just make units purely at the end and pure drones in the beginning, you sort of want to get the optimal saturation. So when you get your optimal saturation quicker, you can sort of get more mining, more money for units later. As I did a little extractor trick, that's entirely optional. You don't have to do that. You can just wait for the Overlord. But I really don't like waiting for my queens or something, or waiting for my larva to bank up at 3. So just do whatever accordingly. And now, since I want the most production out of my 3 bases, I've decided, okay, I need 1 queen to inject my main, 1 queen to inject my natural, and 1 queen to inject my third. And since my third isn't finished and it's not capable of having a queen, I should have a queen migrate there. And so I queue up a queen as soon as possible after the first queen is finished. I move it to my natural, and I too inject my natural. And once this larva inject pops and this queen pops, it will be able to inject itself. And when I inject with this queen, I can then migrate it to this hatchery and start another queen here to inject the natural. So then in the end, I will still have 3 queens, if that's clear or not. Yep, so that's really just getting as much production as fast as you can. Obviously, there are a little bit of tweaks that you can think of yourself to do this, but I just want people to understand the kind of build that they're doing, not just to follow a build blindly, because that's very not a good idea if you want to understand the game from a knowledgeable perspective. And another really important point is that people have switched from the hotkey scenario with their queens and injecting. People have switched from an individual queen hotkey into a hotkey with all your queens, and when you backspace or you bind something else to backspace to inject your hatcheries, you're quickly flipping through your bases. And I haven't gone to that because, and I will explain this, is because everyone should have a hotkey for every base they have. And most people would do camera location hotkeys. But when I do it, I copy the whole Idra hotkey thing, is that you have each queen on an individual hotkey, and so when you double click your hotkey for one queen, it will go back to that queen, and that will be a specific base. And when you do the backspace method, you really neglect that if you don't use camera hotkeys, because you don't really go to each base that you want. You have to keep backspacing through to find the correct base, or more likely you are more likely to use the minimap and finding that base instead. So just a little thing to consider: if you are using the backspace inject technique, then you should definitely try to have some location hotkeys, and it is great for ZVT and every other matchup, obviously, but against like multi-pronged drops, it will just, if you get used to your camera location hotkeys, it will just improve your game a lot more. Now, enough about that. So let's just get on with this really boring replay. that's more of a knowledge based. So you see here, I have 16 workers, and that's great, and I have 2 on each mineral patch. That's the most important part, because if sometimes, or most of the time, I would say, 75% of the time, is that one of these mineral patches, the drones like to stack up and cause a little bit of trouble, and then they'll stack 3 drones on one mineral patch, and one of the mineral patches will be left out with only 1 drone. And then that is where a lot of pros sort of neglect, and I think it's very important to address this. And that's why some people over-drone their bases over 16, is because they want to make sure that the gaps aren't filled. But I like to use a tactic I call Byakugan, is where you stare at your screen really, really, really hard for 1 second and pick out which mineral patch has 3 drones on it, and then you can relocate that one extra drone onto its appropriate mineral patch. So that's all I want to say about the saturation. Obviously, gases take 3 to saturate, and the blizzard numbers really have that implemented. So now I have all 3 hatcheries with their queens with maximum efficiency for injecting. I was about to say ejaculating there for a second. That's kind of weird. Next thing I want to explain is the notifications icon that you will see in this part of the screen. Everyone neglects them, or most people neglect them. But this, if I ask you, how do you inject, or how can you hit your inject timings perfectly? And most people usually just guess. Some people cycle through their queens and see that if their energy is at 25, they can inject. But obviously, no one's injects are perfect. So you sort of try to so it's sort of a bit unreliable if your energy is a little bit higher, and maybe it's like 25 and you can't inject it because it's already injected because you missed an injection or something like that. The whole point why I'm saying this is because of the notification icons that will say that your additional larva is birthed. If we go along this replay, like things like unit complete, this is how you see anything that happens on with your tech. If your larva pops, it will say additional larva birth. And this is where I get double gas at 6 minutes, part of the build. See, additional larva birth. and there's 2 hatcheries, so I subsequently have to inject 2 hatcheries. And hopefully this will inject soon. Yep. And we'll also say overlords. It'll also have additional larva birth, and more importantly, it'll also have upgrades finishing, so you'll know when to start your other upgrade. Obviously, it's really hard to keep an eye on this when you're playing a really long game or something that's really intensive, and you can't really keep your mind on the top right and the mini map and the notifications. But just if you can, if you strive to have the capability of doing so, then it is obviously much better to inject perfectly, as it will keep coming up, and you will have to have your eyes glued on. And as part of the build, I like to get my Roach one at 7 minutes and my Evo Chamber as well. And since I'm getting these buildings, I decide, okay, an Evo Chamber is sort of an upgrade. Upgrades require gas, so I'm going to get more gases. And since I'm spending my gas on link speed and my layer, which I will get eventually, that is only supported by these 2 gases. And if I get a Roach Warren that requires 25 gas per Roach, and an Evo Chamber that requires 100 gas or 150 gas for upgrades, then it's gonna cut into my layer timing if I only ran off of these 2 main gases. So I decide, okay, I need more gases since I'm teching up, so I should line up all these buildings at the same time. This is pretty much just sort of thinking about the game, and I'm pretty sure Day9 says this a lot, and I just want to reiterate that. And so, as you see the notification icons, there are a lot that go on, and it might take you a while to catch on to all these things and to do them all relatively on time as they are listed in the notification icon. But that is how we strive to play faster. Like, people don't play faster because, as I always said, people don't play fast because they spam a lot, or that they just right click or just do things a lot. It's just because they have to look at what they need to do and then they do it. And when they do these things, your APM will naturally increase because you realize you need to do stuff. And here's me just trying to use the Byakugan tactic, as I did a little fail there. And initially there was 3 drones on the leftmost mineral patch, and I had to relocate it to the one in the middle, but I sort of mismicroed that a little bit. So as I'm going along with this build, you have to realize that you have to have the quickest max time. You have to keep injecting as soon as you can, and I'm doing an okay job as my queens are relatively low energy, corresponding to their inject timers. And my money has been relatively low all game because even though I'm 3 base saturated and I'm just making roaches, I've timed my hatchery, my macro hatchery, so that it can have its queen relatively early. Usually when you build a hatchery, a hatchery takes 100 seconds to build, and when you make a queen takes 50 seconds to build. So you should always make your queen when your macro hatchery is halfway done, or whatever hatchery is halfway done, to get it injecting as soon as possible. But I was getting my upgrades on my main layer and my natural, or stuff like that. So you should really just think about it. Okay, don't always get upgrades on your layer. Get them at auxiliary hatcheries that aren't layers, because your layer either needs to go to a hive or it needs to make a queen for a nearby macro hatchery. So just sort of like think about that before you start upgrading. And obviously I've been spending a lot of money on upgrades as well, so my money has been relatively low this entire game. And in this exercise, supply block is a very big issue and a problem that most people encounter. Like, even now I encounter a supply block. Is that try not to make overlords in increments of over 3 or 4 overlords at a time, because if you like say you pump a huge round of roaches and you're supply blocked, and then you have to wait another inject to spawn 5 more overlords, or like 8 more overlords, then it's going to cut really hard into your larva time, and your hatcheries won't naturally produce the larva that it usually does. because it already has like over 3 larvae at the hatchery because you haven't been able to use a larva from your previous injections. So to get more larvae and to have a better production time to be able to make units whenever possible, you should always make your overlords in many, many small increments of 2 or 3. Obviously, when you're running off of 4 hatcheries, you're gonna at least need like 4 overlord increments. But in regular games, I'm just saying this. And every time you make an overlord, and you have sort of map control, or if your overlords can't get killed by an enemy player, then you should always, as soon as you make the overlords, just rally them by right clicking on the minimap, and it will rally the egg overlord to somewhere on the map. And this is very good because, as you can see, I haven't really, on my player perspective, I haven't really bounced around the map too much. But the overlords are still all the way around the map because I've been rallying them, so I don't have to rally them later. Like, I'm sure you might have a time where you just said, oh, I have no map vision, and then you have like a cornucopia of like 20 overlords in your main, and you start like shift right clicking everywhere on the minimap, and that's just a really big chunk of time wasted. And so I'm sort of max now, and it's at 11:39. So hopefully, if you do this exercise, you can see what your time is, and hopefully you can beat mine. And hopefully, with enough practice, you could be like the quickest person, as I said. Like this was a variant of Stefano's build, and Stefano did it at like 11:20. And obviously, you have to follow each different build, and each different tweak to the build will make sure that you max out at a different time, depending on what kind of tweak it is. So hopefully this little commentary has helped you improve your mechanics a bit more, and give a little bit of insight, as it is directed to mostly diamond players. This is an exercise that I've been doing when I was diamond, because I realized that when I started watching my replays, I would see that when I 15 hatched against Terran, even though I was on 2 base and had a lot of larvae, my money would be going up to like 600 minerals. And it sounds really noobish, but sometimes you go back and look on that replay and go like, oh my god, my minerals were like skyrocketing, and I'm like a diamond player. How is this happening? So, well, this is now how you can fix it. Try to always keep your money in this exercise less than like 500. And even if you have a lot of money, make sure that you have the larva and the supply available, to spend it all accordingly, and to sort of just be more comfortable with your race. And when you do a build, just try to understand why you're doing that build in that specific manner. And maybe you read like Startail Life's 12 pool 13 gas like Baneling bust in ZVZ, and you ask yourself, why is this build like this? I was reading it, and it was like you make 6 slings in the beginning, and I really wondered why you had to make 6 slings as soon as your pool was finished. And I wondered, were they to put on a bit of harass, or were they to deny scouting? And if they were just to deny scouting, then you don't really need 6 slings. You can just get 2 lings and have your queen wall off the bottom of your ramp if it's not near time to inject. So you can get some more drones out. You can tweak builds. You don't have to follow builds as they are written. It's just that if you understand why you need to tweak something, then you can do it regardless of what the build originally stated. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully this training exercise you guys will try to practice, and if you can't, then, well, too bad. Until next time.